What was the most uncomfortable or awkward moment you ever experienced playing Dungeons and Dragons? Part 2. My DM is a bit loose on taking suggestions on things that don't impact the campaign but make us roleplay. My dwarf was attacking some random bandit and he had to move under a beam and hit the bandit with his hammer. I rolled a 1. The DM said I ran under the beam but raised my hammer too early, hitting the beam and falling prone. To which the cleric replied and he pooped his pants. That was only the first time my dwarf shat himself. Once a buddy of mine set me up on a date with a girl he knew. We hit it off and started dating. Turns out the buddy didn't expect us to hit it off. He was just trying to ice her a bit while he was off dating someone else. When he found out we were actually dating, he flipped out. He was my DM. The next session he tried to kill my character, AD&D 2nd edition, level 8 fighter. The other players wouldn't have it. It turned into a weird shouting match about betrayal and douchebaggery. The DM would get drunk and start hitting on me, calling me by his sister's name the whole time. I guess I sorta looked like her. This happened every time he got drunk, which was often. Years and years ago, during my first ever exposure to Dungeons and Dragons, I was part of a group that included a somewhat confused young man. He was right on the cusp of puberty, as we all were at the time, and his burgeoning urges would very frequently influence his role playing. That probably doesn't sound too surprising. Many players bring their darker desires to light during the game, but this particular fellow took things to an extreme. For one thing, the guy in question had opted to play a tall, buxom woman with a penchant for seducing the other players' characters. That was a little bit annoying on its own, and it was exacerbated by the fact that he'd often insist on acting out what his own avatar was doing, to make sure we got it, he'd claim. Worst of all, though, was how he would respond whenever his advances were spurned. First he'd seem to be personally offended by the rejection, then he'd stop talking and sulk, and his silent tantrum would culminate with an unprompted preaching session. See, while none of us ever got confirmation of this, everyone's assumption was that the fellow was gay. And suffice to say that his sexuality didn't play well with his religion. His family was part of a particularly weird sect that viewed just about everything as either blasphemous or worthy of shame. I'm not sure why Dungeons and Dragons was acceptable, but my guess is that it was one of his only outlets, so he made an exception. But unfortunately for the rest of us, that meant our inclusion in his role-playing was always bordering on uncomfortable. None of us wanted to make him feel unwanted or unsafe, but at the same time, we weren't too pleased by the prospect of making out to make sure we got it right. We also got pretty sick of the sermons, if I'm honest. TLDR, closeted Christian creepily characterizes carnal compulsions. Whenever someone just disobeys the rules they agreed to, it's so awkward to have that conversation. I used to DM, and one of my stipulations was no evil player characters. I've just seen it lead to too much in-character fighting in the past, and in-character fighting usually leads to real-life arguing, so nope. Just a rule I have when I DM. One guy agreed. Then made the most evil neutral character I've ever seen. Sorry, but disguising yourself as someone, then cutting her face off while she's still alive so you can't assume her identity is evil. I don't care what it says on your character sheet, Evan. There were a lot of other evil things he did. Torture, unprovoked murder of innocents, etc. But this is where the rest of the party finally turned on him. He fought it for a while, but eventually he brought a new character the next session. Yes, I have one. When I was in the Navy I played with a group that mostly consisted of me and 3 other couples. The DM was engaged to this insanely hot Swedish national whose rather well-fitting clothes were distraction enough, but no, it was our dwarf warrior and our halfling illusionist who are the subject of this story. Well, we had been playing together at this point for about a year and we all knew they were trying to get pregnant. What we didn't expect was that during one pretty intense session, she's constantly checking her watch like she has to be somewhere, finally leans over and whispers to her husband, and they make some half-assed character conference excuse and duck out of the room. Now, this session also happened to be at their house. Not 5 fucking minutes later, we hear them. They are not quiet people by no means, and the words that were coming out of their mouths would have any impregnation fetishist coming in their pants. We however could only stare at each other. Finally the DM's girlfriend, who remember is hotter than the freaking sun, just blurts out, "Do we just leave because they are going to be fucking for a while?" And worse, we had to creep out because the room we are playing in is right next to their bedroom. Been building up a good relationship with an NPC over the past year. Finally roleplayed the part where I asked her to marry me. DM died on me. Turns out he had just learned 1 week prior his wife wanted to divorce. Ouch. I played while stationed on a ship, and because the group was co-ed we had to host the games in the mess decks. There was a guy working the mess decks who had a huge crush on me and was a super fundamental Christian. One day, when I got up to go to the bathroom in the middle of a game, he stopped me on my way back, grabbed my hand, and prayed for my soul because I was playing a devil's game. I yanked my hand back and said I appreciate the concern but never ever do that again, and I walked away. Thankfully he didn't try it again and was only on TAD, temporary assigned duty that every new sailor must complete, so he was sent back to his division a month later and I didn't see him again. This was more than 15 years ago. Climbing up the inside of a large grain silo at night, torches in hand, we ascended towards the treasure we thought was at the top. All of a sudden a noise. I draw both of my swords. A player exclaims, "Are you sure?" The DM confirms. With a subtle nod from the player, suddenly the DM gets an excited look in his eye. Everyone roll a luck check. And I mean everyone. A cry of surprise goes around the table. "Wait, why?" we all exclaim nearly in unison. Danver drew his swords. Yo, and Danver was holding a torch. If he draws his swords I have to assume that he dropped his torch. In the silo, full of very dry grain, it is now a roaring fire. Only one of us survived. A DM took a comedic moment too far and basically turned an entire adventure into a send-up of the Rocky Horror Picture Show. A mysterious alchemist character who was supposed to be a recurring villain practically turned into Dr. Frankenfurter. Jokes naturally creep into a campaign, but I've always felt when you start writing them in that it can be too much. Months later, when that group had fizzled, I had an opportunity to view the DM's notes. And what that adventure could have been before the jokes was something awesome. I DM'd for a group where one of the girls was convinced the entire game was for her enjoyment. She would throw fits when the rest of the party didn't want to do what she did and constantly tried to split up from them. It eventually culminated in a very awkward temper tantrum when she refused to go with her party and ended up dying alone. Huge mansion house rented full of gamer roommates. None of us felt like running and we all wanted to play together. So, we had a new GM over that we found on a meetup type site. The first campaign he runs for us is a pre-written module out of a very old dragon magazine. The plot is that a husband has gone missing and the wife hires adventurers to find him. Seems harmless. We go into the basement and there's a rough-hewn tunnel bored into it. Adventure into the tunnel. Kill rats. Kill bigger rats. Kill things that look like half rat half human monsters. We think we're rats, so. Okay. Get to a den where holy fuck the husband is aggressively being fuck-ridden by a giant rat mother. In the act of it. Elevanty. Horrified, we kill the rat mother sex beast. We try to figure out if the husband is okay. He's furious we slew his rat paramour and attacks as if under a spell. We try everything we can to cure him, but his onslaught is relentless. We ended the game with him bound and gagged, returning him to the wife and saying he needs mental help after the trauma he endured. The wife thanks us and pays us. Us roommates are looking at each other like, WTF just happened here? This is the module that this dude read and thought fuck yeah. That's what I'm running for, brand new people I have never met before. It'll be awesome. I've told this story before, but I was deployed alone to a unit I was unfamiliar with. I tried to make friends there and one of the things the guys would do was play D&D. I had never played but I asked if I could and they set me up. So here I am walking through a cave with literal and figurative strangers. I don't know these guys but everyone seems level-headed. That is until I get to a cliff face that is too dark to see. I have a torch so I light it up. Fucking shit explodes. I must have missed something because everyone turned on me. One guy got up and threw a chair. He fucking rolls to douse the torch and calls me an asshole. I'm confused. I say sorry and we carry on, but every move I made they all gave me a distrustful look. It was a long deployment and tensions were high. It was my first and last time playing D&D. A friend lost his virginity while LARPing, in character. That was awkward. Edit. Okay, so this is how it went down. It was 21 or 22 years ago and me and my group of friends were around 17 years old. LARPing was very new and almost unheard of in my country. We had been playing D&D for some time though, but not seriously. His group wasn't really a group of best friends, more like a diverse collection of kids that happened to like RPGs. Small town, you couldn't really pick and choose. Since one of the guys have become a very close friend, there was this kid named Fabian, who I didn't really know at the time. He had been to some kind of indoor vampire LARP event previously and talked four of us into trying LARPing. First weekend after the summer vacation there was this big fantasy LARP close to us. So we were 5 teenage boys plus one girl Fabian had met on that vampire evening. She was older than us, not much, maybe 2 or 3 years, but at that age it's a big difference. Typical nerdy girl. Very confident towards us younger guys but probably a bit shy and awkward towards most other people. Not very nice at all. Average looking. In hindsight I think the reason Fabian was so persuasive about us going there was to get this girl. The rest of us hadn't met her before the weekend, just heard Fabian bragging about making out with her, in character, as vampires I presume. Being nerdy teenagers this was big news even though we tried to act unimpressed. Us 6 formed an elvish ranger band. We all put some hours into making costumes, but we still looked really bad. I don't think we passed as elves. The weekend came and the autumn had come early and the weather was cold. We got off to a late start Friday night. Lots of rules to be explained and so on. The organizers seems happy we were there even though we looked like contemporary hobos. I remember an orcish band with insanely ambitious costumes. We didn't talk much to the other players beforehand. Instead we walked as quick as possible to our campsite and make some kind of shelter in the falling light. I struggled to stay in character and a couple of us never really got in character in the first place. Fabian and the girl was speaking some make-up elvish and seemed a bit annoyed. We made a bonfire and sat around it trying to make conversation. Every time someone said something out of character the girl would shut us up which only created long periods of silence. No alcohol either as that was strictly forbidden. In my country alcohol is a necessary social lubricant. Pretty soon the girl made up some story about heritage and bloodlines and how she had to mate with Fabian. It all seemed rehearsed and scripted. She took his hand ceremoniously and led him into our crappy shelter mere meters from us and the light of the fire. What followed still makes me ambivalent. All of us were virgins. We were envious and disgusted at the same time. They spoke Elvish, we saw most of it and it went quick. As we were sitting so close we couldn't really talk about it without them hearing so we shared the moment in silence. Since then we had talked about it for hours. We went to bed outside as no one wanted to be the first to enter the shelter. In the morning us boys got killed by the orcs. The girl got captured. We went home early and no one ever tried LARPing again. The girl kept LARPing with the orcs. Fabian was pissed but never admitted it. In fact he repeatedly said that they didn't have sex and that it all was an act. But what we saw through those stick walls, I will never forget. Hey everybody, thanks for watching and if you've made it this far please consider subscribing, and thanks for watching.